Nothing screams government tyranny quite like a lawyer who forgot to pay his own bar dues whining about oversight. Because shocker, Florida's AG, who couldn't keep up with his own dues, who got himself sidelined from practicing law, and who has been slapped with contempt charges by courts, is now trying to tear down the very system that's reining him in. What a coincidence. Welcome to Ring of Fire Weekends. I'm Josh, and we are talking about Florida's Attorney General James Uthmeier. He's now urging the Florida Supreme Court to cut ties with the American Bar Association, accusing the ABA of being woke, liberal bias, and everything. He's even saying that they were discriminatory against a Catholic law school. At the same time, Uthmeier and his cronies are furious because the Florida Supreme Court just shut down a proposal that would allow the government to hire people to practice law without having to pass the Florida bar for 3 years. Hey, let's allow our pilots to fly for the airlines for a few years before we find out if they're qualified. Yeah, you heard all of that right. Florida is begging to allow unqualified lawyers to practice law, presumably because they'll have a hard time finding enough talented attorneys that are willing to implement and defend DeSantis' whack job agenda. Thankfully, Florida's top court, made up entirely of Republican appointees, said absolutely not. And this is what I'm finding hysterical about this whole thing. While Uthmeier was running on DeSantis' presidential campaign, and then he later served as his chief of staff, Uthmeier himself became ineligible to practice law. Why? Because he didn't pay his annual Florida bar dues. That is the stupidest reason not to be allowed to practice law. Sure, yeah, he eventually paid up and he was reinstated, but the good times didn't last long. Over the summer, this lawyer turned MAGA loyalist got slapped with contempt charges when he told state law enforcement that they were under no obligation to follow a federal judge's order that prevented cops from enforcing certain immigration-related laws. So Uthmeier is working against the ABA, and it's all starting to make a whole lot of sense. But his latest beef with the ABA comes from his claim that the American Bar Association discriminated against a Catholic law school in Florida. It's a serious charge. Uthmeier is saying that the ABA discriminated against this law school because of its religious mission. Not so fast, James. Let's talk about what really happened. In August of last year, St. Thomas University fell out of compliance with the ABA's anti-discrimination requirements. That's a pretty serious charge there. This is coming after St. Thomas Law School also failed to meet another ABA standard requiring that the schools simply maintain a budget. The ABA wasn't going after St. Thomas because it was Catholic. It went after him because they broke the rules. Look, there's Catholic universities all over this country following the rules. There's law schools like Notre Dame, and Uthmeier himself went to Georgetown. Those are great ABA-accredited law schools. And, by the way, in December of 2025, St. Thomas and the ABA announced that the school was back in compliance. So what in the hell is Uthmeier actually whining about? He seems to have taken his instructions straight from page 1 of the DeSantis playbook. When there's no controversy, create one. Now, Uthmeier is asking the Florida Supreme Court to cut ABA accreditation out of all of the state's law schools altogether. This all comes on the high heels of Texas's similar move. Daddy DeSantis' favorite little boy saying, I hope the Florida Supreme Court will soon follow suit and end the leftist accreditation cartel that is the ABA. Yeah, the act of simply having standards is leftist, and it's too much for the Attorney General to bear. Who needs ethics when you're trying to make it a third-level grand wizard in MAGA world like Uthmeier is? This is the same Attorney General who's been asking the courts to block ballot initiatives for abortion access and marijuana legalization, which he doesn't like. This is the same office that's pushing the boundaries of authority, transparency, and process. You've seen this movie before, especially if you followed our coverage of the Hope Florida saga. Undermine the rules, attack the referees, then claim the game was rigged. Don't get your way? Whine about it. It's loyalty over law. If you can't play by the rules, burn the rule book. Being qualified and experienced is far less important than pledging allegiance to the goofy state of DeSantistan. Now look, here's where I take this personally. You guys in our long-time audience, you guys know where Ring of Fire came from. We were founded by Mike Papantonio, one of the most respected and hardest working attorneys in this country. I'm filming this in the same building as attorneys that are fighting big pharma, big tech, tobacco, and corporations run rampant. And for me, for nearly a decade, I've worked with hundreds of the best trial attorneys and law firms all over this country. And I've worked against some of the best trial lawyers in this country. I've seen dozens of the top law school grads studying tirelessly to pass the bar exam. It's where they can separate those that can fly the plane from those who can't. I have watched the culmination of years of work and millions of man-hours come down to a few days in a courtroom in front of a judge or a jury. And I've seen corporate malfeasance exposed. And I've seen justice happen, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Because amazing attorneys worked their asses off to make sure the truth was heard. The adversarial system matters. It forces evidence into the light. It punishes shortcuts and exposes cheaters and liars. It rewards preparation over loyalty, and it works. Are there bad attorneys? Absolutely. And that's why the ABA is actually so important. They set and enforce the standards. It isn't perfect, but it works. And it works only when no one gets to tilt the field. But of course, people like Uthmeier and DeSantis and Pam Bondi and Donald Trump, they play the game because they know that their entire regime crumbles as soon as laws start getting upheld, ethics are enforced, and the truth starts to prevail. MAGA and James Uthmeier, they don't want justice. They don't want rigor. They don't want accountability. They're just so tired of being asked tough questions. They're tired of being shut down in court time and time again. And they're tired because when the law says prove it, they know they can't. So they just start screaming woke over and over again. The 147-year-old American Bar Association doesn't have a woke problem. Instead, this country and this state has a tyranny problem, a MAGA problem, a DeSantistan problem. And the law demands so much better than that. And frankly, so should all Floridians and all Americans. Thanks for watching that video. I'm Josh with ROF Weekends. Be sure to catch Jared during the week, and I'm going to see you next week with more great content. And if you don't already, be sure to check out these other videos. Give us a like, follow, subscribe, wherever those buttons are.